So I really like ghost shows, like investigating shows for ghosts, because the afterlife is really interesting to me because we don't know what's gonna happen after we die, because, like, I could die right now and I would never know what I'm going into. We're just going into it blind, because people who die, we can't talk to them again to find out what's gonna happen. Like, a bunch of religions all state that, like, oh, you go to heaven, oh, you go to hell, oh, purgatory, oh, I turn into a tree. And you just don't really know. And I find that really interesting, because if there is this afterlife, and ghosts are stuck on this plane, then is there something we could do to help them rest if there's another part of the afterlife, or if life is just being a ghost for the rest of your life, or if ghosts even exist, if malevolent things really do exist. Does that mean there's actually a hell? It's just, the whole thing is really interesting to me, and finding out and getting, like, evidence with these ghost investigating shows is just really interesting to see, because a lot of times it's obviously not something they could do. And some people will be like, oh, I don't believe it. But then, like, there's shows like Stranded, where they take a group of people and, like, send them to this haunted place and just leave them there for, like, a week, I want to say. I can't actually remember what happens in Stranded because I haven't seen it in a while. But they, like, leave them there. And, like, there's certain things that'll happen. Like, there's this one show where the group goes into this asylum that's supposedly extremely haunted, where this guy he was doing drugs and he had an overdose, and his friends didn't want to get in trouble for doing drugs, so they left him out on the back. And at the time, it wasn't an asylum, it was a hospital. And what ended up happening was, because the bell didn't work at the time, and the hospital was run mainly by nuns, that he ended up dying on the back of the hospital. And this hospital is supposedly so haunted that the caretaker had left by the time the Stranded show was there, so there was no one there. And the people who were there ended up, like, exploring and stuff like they do, and it was daytime, they were exploring, and they found the caretaker's rooms, and all their stuff was still there. So either they obviously got so scared that whatever was in that hospital that they just left and didn't come back, like the Amityville house, which is a thing, and, like, families have lived there, and, like, the last family that lived there was just like, we're done, no. And, like, all their stuff is supposedly still there because they don't want to go back to the house. And it's like, these accounts, they're really interesting, and I find the best show that does these things is Ghost Adventures, because they actually try to disprove things. And if something really good happens, then it's like, oh, we can't really unexplain this. And, like, there's a video that they show in some of the episodes where they're talking about poltergeists, about this evidence that they found. And it's literally like rocks get lifted off the ground and get thrown across the room. There's no one on that side, and there's no way they can be lifted up and thrown, because also a broomstick gets lifted up at the same time and gets thrown. And it's really interesting. And I find that, like, those kinds of shows are just, they're really interesting to watch, because they oftentimes prove that stuff happens. And, like, on the Stranded episode, the people that were in the hospital, they took the bell that the caretaker was going to fix, and they put the new bell in the place where the door was. And during the nighttime, while they were investigating, they heard the bell ring, and all three of them were there, and no one was around them. So they ran out and they checked, and there was no one there. The bell was something that had to be physically turned, it couldn't just go off by itself, and it was just really interesting to see, because obviously it was either someone who was there, or Or was it the ghost of the man that had died on the step ringing the bell? And maybe that helped him move on? Who knows if we can even move on? Like, we're just stuck reliving our lives, and that's why we're in certain places. And, like, the question of the afterlife is always really interesting to me. And because we just don't know.